The Minister of Natural Resources, the MLA for Cumberland South, is joining us after a week in sick bay, as they call it. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Bill. How are you today?
Uh-oh, you don't sound a whole lot better.
No, well, look, we always bragged about us never missing an interview, and unfortunately, I was under the weather last week, and I appreciate you having to postpone that interview last week. But I'm much better than what I was last week. I don't know what hit me, but it really drained the energy out of me, and bit of a chest congestion still, but a lot better than what I was.
Well, I can hear it in your voice now, so it must have been really bad a week ago. We'll soldier on just the same, and I don't want to make a draw dots or join dots rather with the topic we want to talk about today, but maybe you can help me to understand that this is not connected. You've advised us, and I'm sure that it's coming as the Minister of Natural Resources, that your wildlife people tell you we have apparently witnessed or found evidence of the bird flu, that wild avian influenza, in the Parsboro area. This is a first, I think. Tell us about it, please.
Yeah, certainly, Bill. It's not confirmed as of yet, but with what's taken place in 2022, if you remember, there was a huge outbreak in the province about the avian influenza with bird flu. But in the last few days, there have been different reports of dead birds being found around the Abateau Bridge in Parsboro. And so first it started as an MLA issue when I got a few phone calls, and quickly turned into a ministerial thing where we had the department look and investigate it. But it also in parallel with what some dead birds that were being found in the Shelburne area. So we just want to be precaution and take the proper steps just in case it is a return to the avian flu. But I can't stress enough that if dead birds are found anywhere, do not approach it. Do not pick the bird up and take it to a local DNR office or a local Department of Agricultural office. Report it. There is a number, Bill, 1-800-565-2224. That's 1-800-565-2224. And I can't stress enough, do not approach the dead birds. Give a report out, and it's not that the group would go out and pick up every carcass. They need to know the details of where the bird's being found and things like that to investigate and further go. But we have collected some birds from the area, and some of them have been sent off for testing.
Now, of course, the idea of birds having the flu is not new. It happens over the years. But in recent years, and I'm saying in the last 12 months for sure, we've witnessed the transfer of a similar thing that they're linking to bird flu, now reaching other animals and now reaching humans. And it's been rather deadly. So this is not something to toy with.
No, it's not, because it can be transmitted in, and we look at some cases that are in the U.S. right now where this avian flu is actually transmitted into wildlife or into domestic agricultural animals. That's something that we're trying to avoid here. So these advices from the experts are we're strongly asking people to take heed and pay attention. There's some social media blitzes that are going on around the province right now. This is not just locally. Why we're speaking of it is because there has been some birds found in the Parsboro area, and we're just asking people stay away, but do report to that number so the right department can get out there and do an investigation, get the information about what's taking place, and take the proper procedures and protocols. Because we do not want humans to be infected with this. We don't want our wildlife to be infected, or our agricultural animals as well. It's a serious situation, similar to 2022. It's early on in the days that we're seeing it, so we want to be proactive and get that message out as soon as possible.
Now, let's be really, really clear here for people, too. We're not saying that there is the bird flu that we've heard, kind of pandemic sort of situation localized happening in elsewhere. These are groups of dead birds. They're all wild birds at the moment. That's all you've found to date. And this kind of happens from time to time. It doesn't necessarily mean it is the bird flu that we're worried about. It just means there's some birds dying. And for now, at least, your department is going to deal with this and does deal with this and has dealt with it in the past and knows exactly what to do. So we're not putting out the alarm. We're simply putting out the warning that if you find birds dead along the side of the road, wherever you might find them, don't pick them up, don't do anything with them, but in fact, maybe report it to your local office of the Department of Natural Resources. And that way you and your guys can take care of it. Is that really what it is? A warning, not a scare?
Yeah, no, exactly. Just because we are so close to 2022 and there have been other areas of the province that have reported dead birds, we just want to be precautious and take the proper steps in determining what is taking place. But if it were to be avian flu, that's why we're putting out the warnings. We don't want people to go near the dead birds, and we'll take the proper steps. But as you've indicated, nothing has been confirmed yet. These are preliminary steps to heed caution, I guess.
Now, let's change to a kind of more political topic, of course. You are, despite the sound of your voice being like you're not fully recovered yet, you are in Halifax and prepared to take part in the legislature. And as you know, Radio from Hope Centre, we interview the Premier, the Leader of the Opposition. We also talk to other politicians like our Member of Parliament, the three mayors in the county of Cumberland. We talk a lot of politics, not just with you. And you're back at it right now, and something's different. When you first came into politics, you won an election. You won another election and set kind of a record, really, for personal election. And your party won a super majority in the House. And over the first few years, you went about your business in Cumberland South and beyond, and people were kind of patting you on the back. They were thanking you. They were smiling with you. They were probably inviting you out to dinner. But I think things have changed. Something has happened, and it now sounds like you're having to defend yourself, having to defend your legislative package, both in the House and outside. And one wonders, I hesitate to say it, but there's an old saying that you probably know, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And we see now with your supermajority in the House, you've given fuel, you've given ammunition to the opposition where before they had none. What's going on?
Well, there are changes that take place, and if you look at history, you look at any government that has had a supermajority, there are avenues for opposition to put fuel into the fire and make arguments. This is a process of government, and you're quite right. There is a supermajority there, so that there is some vocal voices from opposition that, quite frankly, that you would have heard from me when it was a majority government with the McNeil government. Sorry, excuse me. If you hear an alarm going off, I believe they're doing some testing of the fire alarm here. But you'll see voices of the opposition that are vocal about things, and that's not out of the norm. And it gets louder with a majority, especially with the supermajority, and we've seen that with other jurisdictions as well.
But it's not just that you've given them opposition. There are some areas where you've upset your own party people. I get to talk to an awful lot of people, as you know, and I know some of them are part of the political process with your party in Cumberland County, either the South or the North, and they're downright angry. And I'm told that you're running into that flack as you go about your business in the constituency. It's not just the opposition debating points in the House. It's the people saying, wait a minute now, we didn't elect you to do that, and yet you're doing it. Where's it coming from?
So just to correct you, Bill, I haven't run into that. I've run into people even before the supermajority when we were in government. And I've heard it from colleagues that have been in government before on both sides of the House. When decisions are made from a government, even people within the party stripes, if you will, within the party organization, don't necessarily like everything that a government does. And I've said it time and time before to you as well. Not everything government does is great. Not everything government does is good. And that doesn't matter whether I belong to the government or not. there are things that are good, there are things that are bad that people will agree and disagree with. What I'm running into when I'm seeing people out in the street is people that are supportive. They're asking questions, and people that aren't necessarily supportive. They know my history of a willingness to have a conversation, and my willingness to dig in and look into things. So that's actually what I'm seeing out on the streets and hearing out into the community. But that I don't really see a difference in this session or the last previous 3 years of a session where I've been involved with government. To be very honest, Bill.
Well, and of course, there many times I've talked to the Premier. He's on the program every month, at least once every month. And when we've talked to him, we've talked about the perception being what people think is going on, not what they know. So, but the perception has real consequences. If people think it's real, then they act like it's real. And right now, you've got people upset over fracking, over the potential for opening up mining and uranium mining. There's a perception that you're trying to muzzle the Auditor General. You're trying to muzzle the Freedom of Information. I'm saying perception, not necessarily fact. And you find yourself on your heels having to defend against those attacks. And the perception is very real. I think it's hurting you.
Yeah, no, there's certainly a perception, and let's talk about the freedom of information just for an example. The changes that were actually involved with the freedom of information process. Some of those recommendations came from the Freedom of Information Office, and some recommendations, and part of what the sort of the narrative out in the public has been is an opposition spin, and as I said, we did the same thing in opposition. But it goes back to the things that you've probably heard the Premier have a conversation about, the Auditor General, where we were trying to get in line with what other provinces were doing with their Auditor General or have done. And when the thing was tabled, the bill was tabled, the Premier heard loud and clear, like, this is not where Nova Scotia wants to go. And the Premier was listening, and he took that heed and to heart, and withdrew those changes in that bill, or made it known that things were going to get amended. And as you look at the Freedom of Information Charter, there is a narrative out there that it is a clad fest, if you will. I don't know what the right term is, Bill. But the Premier's been very adamant. No, we've heard from the public. We are willing to make changes as we go. And I've heard you say many times, Bill, that we actually have a Premier that is willing to make changes when he hears from the public. So this is the course of a process. You present a bill and have that conversation, and you hear the comments from the public, and the government is changing as some dialogue does take place.
Well, I must say you've spiced things up in the legislature, that's for sure, because you have given the opposition something to grab onto. And you're right, the Premier has said some of the legislation, I'm thinking in particular with regard to the Auditor General, the Premier said, yeah, that went a little too far, that's not quite what we had in mind, and we'll amend it. But I guess the discussions in committee about amending things, he hasn't actually presented amendments yet. And until he amends or you amend the bill before it gets voted on in its final form, until he actually makes the amendments, the opposition is using that fact to say that, it's one thing for him to say we went too far, but it's another thing if he sticks to it and doesn't backtrack. And is there fairness in that statement? Has he backtracked formally?
No, he hasn't backtracked from that. The actual process where amendments are put into a bill to change the amendments is at Committee of the Whole House, and that hasn't, the bill hasn't even made it to the Committee of the Whole House for any amendments to even be discussed as of yet. There's a process in here. There's a public consultation process through Public Bills Committee, and feedback is heard. But the place to actually do amendments and look, this has been traditional ever since I've been in the House, and long before that, is a Committee of the Whole House is where amendments can be put on the floor of the table, debated on the floor, and things take place. Now, having said that, there have been times where amendments have come in at the public bills era or time with recommendations that these could be the amendments, and it gets reported back to the House, but the amendments actually get accepted at that Committee of the Whole.
So I take it what you're saying is that we need to wait till the final package before we cast judgment against your government.
Well, no, I mean every government should have scrutiny. You've heard me say that, and I've always accepted that, Bill. But they're quite right. There should be questions asked about every bill, whether it's my bill or a counterpart's bill. Every question that is posed should be asked of everything. But the actual place for amendments is a proper place, is committee of the whole, and. I don't want to say that somebody should or shouldn't cast judgment on the presenting of a bill as it's typically presented in the House. Because let's be honest, there's not a lot of bills that get presented on day one of a bill presentation in first reading that are actually exactly 100% what it is when the royal assent does take place. That's the process of a democratic process to table the bill and approve it as it works through the system.
Got you there. Now, let's change the topic again in a more positive sense. Your leader, our premier, went to the United States last week and into this week. He met regarding fisheries-related products and marketing and all of that, talking about the tariffs. And apparently, I say apparently because unfortunately I missed it, apparently he was interviewed on Fox television. And I'm told from a number of different sources that he did us proud. And I'm hoping that you heard what he said on Fox TV, because I missed it, but I'm told that he stood tall and he sounded like a voice of reason against the voice of totally unreasonable stuff, the President of the United States. Did you hear that, or do you know what he said?
No, I don't know what he said, Bill. Very honestly, I didn't see the segment. I don't think you'd be surprised. I'm not a big Fox News watcher. I'm actually not a big TV watcher, to be honest. But what I will say is I've heard a lot of comments about the segment that our Premier was on Fox News, and I've heard exactly what you're saying, that Premier Rushton is very proud as Nova Scotians and as Canadians. And I've heard that loud and clear from many people over the last few days. And it sort of gives a good feeling, because we hear it in the national news that Nova Scotia is actually one of the governments that's leading the charge of Team Canada and the approach on how we're going to counteract any tariffs that Donald Trump puts onto our Canadian goods. And we've heard from other provinces that Premier Houston was one of the first ones out of the gate, and many other premiers are reaching out to our government to say, what are you doing here? How are you doing this? And it's nice to hear that even politics aside, because we're hearing it from different party colors, if you will, Nova Scotia is doing great, and we're a huge part of this Team Canada approach, and we need to stay together on this.
Well, it's not just the approach to the U.S. And brought about, of course, by Trump, but the whole effort to kind of turn things around in the healthcare sector. Nova Scotia took the lead to make changes that other governments across Canada are beginning to follow. And we see from Dr. Stephen Ellis, who is the shadow cabinet health minister nationally, and he too is taking a page out of Nova Scotia's directive and doing some things, or proposing some things at the national level. So for a very, very long time, the Maritimes were taken for granted, and each of the individual maritime provinces, including Nova Scotia, were considered the little guys. We'll get around to them when we get around to them. Now they're paying attention, and that seems to be thanks in large part to none other than Tim Houston. So pass him on our thanks.
Yeah, no, I certainly will. And we talked about the tariffs, and you bring to light about the changes in healthcare. And a lot of work has gone into it. A lot of work still needs to be done. It's a huge team in the background. But you're quite right. When you have a premier that made a commitment to work on healthcare, I think he even said the words "fix healthcare." I even debated that with him a few times. Will you ever fix healthcare? But you need to work on it. But when you have your premier of small province Nova Scotia being invited on a national stage in North America to come and speak to what your government and province is doing to approach the healthcare crisis, that speaks volumes of what we're doing here in Nova Scotia. And we hear it from the premier day in and day out. A lot of work has been done, But roll your sleeves up because there's a lot more work to be done, and we're willing to do that for Nova Scotians.